since she was able to take the Nazirite vow, though. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if Numbers 30 addresses that. I was just talking about vows and young women that are not yet married and married women. And it's also not cultural because it says that basically God doesn't hold it against her as a sin.
Say that last part. I didn't hear you. I'm not. Only reason why I'm asking you to repeat it.
It's not cultural. It says the Lord will forgive her at each of the verses from all the way through to verse 16.
All right. So some additional things, and what I'll do is I would encourage everyone to read the rest of Numbers chapter 30 about that. So it's a great point to make, though. Thanks for pointing that out. And I really couldn't hear you. And that's not you. I think that's me. My ears are, I think they're permanently stopped up sometimes. So I apologize for asking you to repeat that. Ecclesiastes 5 as well. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it. Similar to what we read in Deuteronomy. For he has no pleasure in fools. And so delaying to pay a vow, not paying that vow, not following through with the vow actually is compared here saying it's a foolish thing. Makes you a fool. Pay what you vow. It's better that you should not vow than you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin. I think that's pretty good, and that's reiterated in other parts of the Bible, right? And I think we would all agree that our mouth can get us in a lot of trouble sometimes, right? We learned that in James, same sort of thing there. And the idea here is, if you don't think you're going to follow through with it, if you don't think you can follow through with it, don't put your life on the line here by making a vow that you're just not going to follow through with. So anyway, the Bible, God, the law was very serious about vows, and especially a vow such as a Nazirite vow that is voluntary, I think is something that that really is something that had to be considered before they entered into that kind of verbal contract with God. All right, let's talk about the requirements of the vow. Go back to Numbers chapter 6. It says it makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazirite, separate himself from the Lord. He shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any juice of grapes or eat grapes, fresh or dry. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skin. So the first requirement listed here is no grapes or anything made from a grape. So if you cook with grapeseed oil, you may not have any. Raisins, I guess, would be included in that, the dried grapes. And then it even says the juice. And so we kind of focus on strong drink or alcoholic beverages when it talks about wine, but it even says the juice here or anything, you ground up a seed. I don't know what they did with ground up seeds and skins of grapes, but if you know that, I'd love to hear it. But if you came across those things, you had to avoid them. Strong drink, possibly referring to beer. You know, beer goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. And so this was not probably what we think about, like a brown type liquor, something like that, just something to throw in there and about what this is talking about. But again, not only wine and alcoholic type beverages, but also grape juice. And so anything coming from the grape, that's the first requirement. All the days of the vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head. And so we're very familiar with this with Samson. We know that he had great locks of hair. And so that's part of the vow. And that was a question I think we had last week, was this idea of sometimes, when you fast, so go to the New Testament, what Jesus says about fasting. He even says, when you fast, don't walk around with this mopey look on your face, right? And that's my version of what he said. Don't fast so that everyone can see you fasting, or wear your button that says fasting. Ask me about fasting. No, that's not why you're doing it. But on this vow, to let that hair grow out, forever how long you're going to do it, and if it was a long period of time, maybe it's conspicuous, the avoiding of grape juice and grape products and wine and things like that, but certainly the hair is going to be a giveaway. And so I think that's interesting that it doesn't necessarily have to be a secret vow, okay? Others can know about this. And it might be good that they hold you accountable because of that vow as well, even though that is a personal vow between you and God. Notice this as we go through number 6 and a couple more, well, it'll be in number 6 as we get into maybe what you do to end the vow. Because it says, until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord, he shall be holy. I think that's interesting. So you are holy when you are living under this Nazirite vow, and that holy being meaning set apart, sanctified, all those words that kind of go with that. He shall let the locks of his hair, of his head, grow long. Verse 6, all the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body, not even for his father or his mother, for his brother or sister. If they die, shall he make himself unclean, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation, he is holy, there it is again, to the Lord. So not going near a dead body. Now, there's already some rules about touching dead bodies and how that would make someone unclean in the law of Moses. If you touch the dead body, then you were unclean for 7 days. You had to wash with water on day 3 and again on day 7. For the priest, there were some rules for priests that they could only touch the dead body, and I think this is kind of where where this comes from. They could only touch the dead body of a close relative, like a mother or a father, or a brother or a sister, a son or a daughter. Interesting thing about sisters, they only counted until they were married, and then they kind of became the responsibility of that other family. And so that was a body you could not touch if your sister was married. And so you kind of see that same pattern following here for the Nazirite vow. It's interesting, though. It says don't go near. I don't know. There's really no indication of how near is in the case of the Nazirite vow. So I think that's interesting. Now, if we go forward, I think this is really cool. If it just so happens, I love this. If any man dies very suddenly beside him. So if you're taking a Nazirite vow and you're just sitting next to a guy and he happens to die all of a sudden. I don't know how often that happened to be something that's actually called out in the condition of the Nazirite vow. I find that very interesting. I mean, were people just dropping left and right? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, if you're just sitting beside someone, and he dies suddenly beside him, and he defiles his consecrated head, then he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it. So what I think this condition is an accidental contact with a dead body. And the example just happens to be if you're sitting on the bus headed to work and the guy next to you dies on your shoulder, something like that. But it's incidental contact, because what's going to happen and what it describes here is there is a way to restart your Nazirite vow because you did not intentionally touch this dead body. The guy died on you. It says on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves, pigeons, to the priest to the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest will offer one as a sin offering, other for a burnt offering, make atonement for him because he sinned by reason of the dead body. He shall consecrate his head the same day and separate himself to the Lord for the days of his separation. So again, restarting that vow is what this is describing here. I think that's a good kind of condition of if you did have accidental contact with the body. It says, bring a male lamb for a guilt offering in the previous period shall be void, and then your separation kind of starts again, your vow starts again. But I just love the way it reads, that if you just happen to be sitting by someone and they die on you. But then he has a condition built in there in the law where you can restart that Nazirite vow. So that's cool. Let's see, what else we should cover here. So a couple times there it talked about being holy, being made holy. Again, that separation, and that was kind of the intent of that Nazirite vow, is separating from everything else and separated to God. And so again, it's cool to point that out as well. Let's talk about ending the vow. How do we end this vow? When we decide, and you decided how long your vow is going to be, and now you've reached the end of the week or the day or the whatever time frame you put on it. Let's see, verse 13. This is the law of the Nazirite. When the time of his separation has been completed, he shall be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall bring his gift to the Lord, a male lamb, a year old, without blemish, for the burnt offering, a ewe lamb, a year old, without blemish, as a sin offering, a ram without blemish as a peace offering, the basket of unleavened bread, loaves, fine flour mixed with oil, the unleavened wafers smeared with oil, and a grain offering for their drink offering. So all these things, the burnt offering, the sin offering, peace offering, unleavened bread, the grain offering, and also a drink offering, all are brought to bring an end to that vow. It's a lot. That seems like a lot. But again, that again goes back to the seriousness of this vow and the dedication that you are making to yourself and to God to honor this vow. Now, the priest has a role. They're going to take those animals. They're going to sacrifice those things. There's a wave offering involved where some of that meat is going to be held up and waved to the Lord. Also, a couple more things I like to point out. Let's see, go down to verse 18. The Nazirite shall shave his consecrated head at the entrance of the tent. So all those locks that you've grown for whatever period of time this has been, time to shave it all off. What on earth are we going to do with this hair? Well, it says to put it in the fire that is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. So part of your offering is there burning on the altar, and all that hair that you've grown out during whatever period of time you decided to do this, you shave it bald, like Leonard over there, and you put it on the fire, which if you've ever smelled hair burning is pretty bad. And so, but you know, it kind of gives you this idea. You remember there were daily sacrifices. And so when they were out and they were camping and they were in the wilderness and they had the tabernacle set up, that fire was burning almost constantly. And it then brings to light this, you know, when you come to the Day of Atonement and when all of those lambs are being slaughtered for the families, one after the other, after the other, after the other, and just how graphic all this really is. And it really gives and sheds some light on it, makes you think about, you know, when we take Jesus and make him that lamb, you know, the real meaning of that and what all was going on in this camp for so many years that God required of them, especially for sin. Now here, you know, again, this is just you ending your Nazirite vow, but even part of that, a lot of offering, a lot of sacrifice, even the hair on your head is being burned as well. In verse 21, is that on this slide? That's one more slide. Let's see, there's the wave offering. Verse 21, this is the law of the Nazirite, but if he vows an offering to the Lord above his Nazirite vow, as he can afford, in exact accordance with the vow that he takes, then he shall do in addition to the law of the Nazirite. You can do more. If when you made your vow, you have decided that you're going to do more than what's required to break that vow or to end that vow and that separation, if you can afford it, bring more. I think that's very interesting as well. I don't know, you know, what would make one decide that or not. There's not a lot of indication there, but it was welcome to bring more, but you did at least have to bring the minimal for that as well. I do wonder, you know, we talked about the beginning of the chapter and it says who, you know, when we asked the question, who could do this? And it was pretty much anybody, a man or a woman. And it didn't matter how much money you had or what your station in life, what was your profession or any of that. However, with the sacrifice that's required, it does seem like it would be someone that had the means to bring all that sacrifice, right? Or someone who's really making a sacrifice. You think about someone who doesn't have a lot, a poor person, who there are, you know, there's conditions in the law where if you can't afford a lamb, we know this about Mary and Joseph, you can bring pigeons for some of those sacrifices, right? It's because you can't afford a lamb. If you're going to do this and you're really dedicating yourself to this vow and this time of separation to God, and you don't have the means to afford that, yet you save up and you bring all those sacrifices, you can see the depth of the meaning and what that really does for someone who's bringing all this to God and really the seriousness of that vow. So anyway, I think we kind of beat the Nazirite vow to death, and that's okay.
I was confused by your question earlier, now that I've had time to sit here and think.
Okay.
Yes, a woman could take a Nazirite vow, a woman could take any vow, and she'd be held to it.
Yeah.
What Numbers 30 says is there's one verse, verse 2 from them. The next 14 verses are about women and their vows. And essentially what it says is a woman will be held to her vow, unless, if she's unmarried, her father hears about it, he can annul it or forbid it. And then she's not held to the vow, and it says the Lord will forgive her. For a married woman, her husband, if he hears of it, he can annul it or forbid it, and again, the Lord will forgive her. If in the day when they do it, either the husband or the father, depending on don't say anything, then she's held to her vow. And then a woman who is divorced or widowed, it's basically the same rule that is presented in verse 2. So that is a better, I think, answer to the question you asked me earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. I'm glad we got back to that. What's that? Do what on the first day of the vow? Oh, gotcha. All right. So, additional conditions to vows that apply to women later on in Numbers chapter 30. So, again, I would encourage you to go look through that and apply that to the things we talked about. So, yep, good information. Anything else on Nazirite vows? Anybody up for one? You'll cut that hair off? I will say this. You know, we have a tendency to look at things and say, hey, that looks really cool. Maybe I should do that. Maybe that will help me get rid of some things in my life. And maybe I should separate from some things and it'll help me be closer to God. I mean, if you want to. I don't know how many of you are touching dead bodies all the time, but that's one condition. But there's just no need in it. And I think that came up last week. I think Gail Sims kind of mentioned that in a comment, that I think with the law being fulfilled by Christ, these are things that this separation, we've been separated, right? We are separated and we've been made holy. And when you read like Ephesians 2 and 19 through about 21, and you read Peter, where Peter says that we're sojourners or aliens and strangers. I think a lot of times we use that passage, and we understand that through the blood of Christ, we have been made holy. We have separation from the world. Now, there's times of meditation, prayer, fasting, and all those things that we should absolutely participate in. But I think it's almost as if this Nazirite vow and the regulations around it, that's also been fulfilled by Jesus. We don't need that anymore. And I do find it interesting when Christians take a tradition or something from maybe the old law, maybe something from another religion or something, they try to celebrate it or use it in their lives when you really don't need those things. Everything we need, has been given to us by Christ and in His Word. So anyway, yes. Okay. Okay.
It's mostly discouraged because they don't have their temple to make the concluding sacrifices, so they would have to do it forever.
That's fair. So if a Jew were to have a Nazirite vow today, they don't really have that opportunity to end the vow. So yeah, I would be very surprised if someone still kept a Nazirite vow. And maybe they do. I don't know. Yes, sir. They couldn't eat the grape juice or drink the grape juice. I think they could bring that as the. No, it was poured out at the altar. The drink offering was poured out at the base of the altar. Yep. They didn't have to drink that. But yeah, if they did, that would be a weird conflict, wouldn't it? All right. Here's what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes. We're going to tell you everything we know about the Philistines. That's not true. We're going to start the Philistines. We'll finish it next week. Let's talk about that. And the reason I want to talk about that is because in Judges chapter 13, the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And so who are these Philistines? It's a pretty interesting history, and I think it's worth just a few minutes. So we'll kind of finish class with this, and we won't get through everything I have. So we'll start class with it next week. I know it's kind of cool. So anyway, talking about the Philistines and who they were, they are a little bit different than the rest of the enemies that we hear about in Canaan because they did not originate in the land of Canaan. If you go back, and I guess to really learn about this and understand this, you kind of have to go back to Genesis chapter 10 and a few verses there. So you actually go all the way back, and this is called the Table of Nations when you read through Genesis 10. And what it tells us is Shem, Ham, and Japheth and how their sons and their grandsons and their great-grandsons repopulated the earth after the flood. And so what we find out in Genesis chapter 10, There in verse 6, the sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, I practiced these earlier, Rama, Sabteca, the sons of Rama, Sheba, and Dedan. Egypt, so the man named Egypt, right? Obviously, we know where he settled. He fathered Ludum, Anamim, Lahibim, that's a hard one, Nephtahim, Pathruzim, Calusim. Now, when we get to Casluim and Caphtorim, these last two who were sons of Egypt, who were grandsons of Ham, it says in parentheses, from whom the Philistines came. And so all the way back to, again, it's called the Table of Nations. You go all the way back, and we find that, now, I do want to make this point, is in the New Revised Standard Bible, the parenthetical comes after Caphtorim. Now, the reason that's important is because there was an area where Caphtorim settled. There was an island, which is thought to be the island of Crete. And so the people from whom the Philistines came began on the island of Crete and some other islands in the Aegean Sea and in that surrounding area. And so they didn't start in Canaan. Now, who would have started in Canaan? A guy named Canaan. There you go. He had all those folks when it goes in, and it's, the Jebusites, the Hivites, and the Amalekites, all those that are listed, even back when he's talking to Moses, who they're going to displace from the land. Those are all his sons. We can take a look at this. There was another map that was a lot bigger, greener, and had bigger words, but it had way less people. So you see, obviously, Egypt is in Egypt, and you see over there Caphtorim over on that far left side or the far west side on the island of Crete. And so that's where the Philistines came from. They are going to migrate to the western part of Canaan land, and they're going to eventually get there. But they did not start there with the rest of those nations or cities or groups of people that were in the land of Canaan when Joshua arrives with the nation of Israel. I think that's it for that passage. Let's jump forward to Genesis chapter 20, 21, 26. I'll say this, Philistines, also coming from Philistia. There were Egyptian and also Assyrian monuments that were found. And the Egyptian monuments, it's Pulsata and Pulista, and so that's where we get Philistia. The Assyrian inscriptions had them listed as the Palastu and the Pulista, and so all those kind of sound, how language kind of develops and evolves, and so it turns out it gets to the point where Philistines and Philistia, being the land of the Philistines, something that we are more familiar with. Seafaring people, they lived on islands, they lived around that island of Crete, and they're going to eventually make their way over to that area that we would still call Gaza, where they come onto the mainland. They had some wars with Egypt on the way. It was not, they weren't trying to really start a war. They were just trying to find a place to live. And so as they came through there, they got some resistance, and that moved them on toward Canaan. And again, on the map, I guess you can see, I think Canaan's kind of listed there. See the Mediterranean Sea, the A and C. That's where you get over to what's going to be the western part of the land of Canaan, the promised land that Joshua led them into. A couple things in Genesis going forward. Genesis chapter 20. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of Negeb, lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned into Gerar. Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister," and Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. So you remember the rest of that story, that God came to Abimelech and said, "Look, don't touch this lady. That's his wife, not his sister." They end up having this treaty. They're sharing some wells and some water. That's where they established Beersheba, where they had that agreement with each other, Abimelech and Abraham. When you drop on down to Genesis chapter 21, we read this: They made the covenant at Beersheba. Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. So he says that Abimelech, and it said there in Genesis 20, he was the king of Gerar, but it said he returned to the land of Philistines. Now, what that most likely is, because archaeology says that they did not get to Canaan, the Philistines, until around the time of the Exodus, kind of before the Exodus. It was not this early. So what that is you got the author, Moses, writing 450 years later, and for the reader, 400 years removed, he said he went back to the land of the Philistines so that me, the reader, knowing where that is, would know where Gerar is. Does that make sense? I'll explain it this way. Got an Auburn, Alabama reference, okay? The Auburn-Alabama football rivalry took a break for 40 years one time because the schools hated each other so bad. And so I can say that Auburn and Alabama did not play for 40 years. Now, during that 40 years, Auburn was still called Alabama Polytechnic Institute. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. But I'm going to say Auburn so you know who I'm talking about. It's the same school. So in Genesis, most folks believe that when he says he returned to the land of the Philistines, that's for the reader's benefit to understand where Abimelech and Gerar actually were. They weren't there yet. And that's according to us. Most of this information I got out of a couple of different Bible dictionaries. One was from 1893, but the other one was a little more recent in the 1990s. So good information, though, so I'll just let you know that. Let's jump forward a little bit, still talking about the Philistines, to Exodus, all right? Exodus 13, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that land was near. God said, lest the people change their mind when they see war and return to Egypt. So the easiest and fastest way to go, and I don't know if I have a map that really, this will be good enough. So the map on the left, if you follow that, you see Gaza down in that bottom left-hand corner. If you follow that on around, I mean, it's like 2 days' journey and you're in Egypt. They could have just walked and been there, right? But they're going to find resistance with the Philistines. They were not ready to fight. They were not ready for war. And so God took them down, all the way down through Sinai, across the Red Sea, and we know, which way the Exodus went. Other passage there was after the Red Sea, Moses, he has that whole song that he sings celebrating the victory that they've had over Egypt. They all died in the sea. We all made it across. We've made it out of Egypt. That was kind of like that was like a line in the sand moment. It's like, we have made it this far. We're not going back. Moses says that. He says, the people have heard, they tremble, pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. So he makes that reference to that. So it's interesting, though. At the start, God did not lead them through Philistia because they would have encountered war. However, only not so long later, they have crossed over the Red Sea, and now Moses says that Philistia they're scared of them now. And all that, it says, the chiefs of Edom, dismayed, trembling, seizes the leaders of Moab, and all the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away because now they've done something, right? The miracle of God, the plagues have happened. Now he's destroyed Pharaoh, and everybody in this area, in this region, knows who Pharaoh and Egypt are. And so to know that God has done this, their hearts are melting. We know that was still the case when they go in and they find Rahab. She even said they still feared the people of Israel. And so that's important. Just crossing that Red Sea and that victory there changed from, if we go to Philistia, they're gonna give us war. It changed it into, now they're scared of us. So before that, it was a no-go. God knew what was going to happen. They would have probably fled on foot back to Egypt, and even after that, they said several times that they wanted to go back. So, real quick, and I'll end on this. If you look on the kind of zoomed in portion of the map, that's the lower portion, you'll see the main cities that we read about when we talk about the Philistines or Philistia, is that Ashdod, Eshkelon, Gaza, Eglon, and Gath. And those are all there. And we're going to look at those. So we'll see them in Joshua 13, 15, and then get into Judges, a little more history about the Philistines. Because, again, starting here in Judges, they're going to be the main enemy for Israel for a long time. And so establishing that relationship, who these people are, is kind of what we're doing here. So we'll pick up there next week, continuing kind of setting the stage as we get into Judges chapter 13. Thank you for your attention, your comments. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you on Friend Day. Friend Day on Sunday.
Good evening. We'll get started with a call upon the Lord. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock. Let God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock. Let God of my salvation be exalted. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. and blessed be the rock, let God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, let God of my salvation be exalted. I will call on the Lord. Okay, cool. All right. So I was trying to think of what I wanted to talk about, and I'm really excited to go on this Yes to Mission trip. And if anybody else is signed up to go, it's this is great. I've never been to Panama, so that's one thing I was excited about. But also, of course, I used to go on mission trips like every couple of years in the before times. But then when COVID hit, then after that, I haven't gone on another one. And that has been bothering me because I'm like, I want to go. So then this opportunity came up and I was like, great, I'm going. As soon as they said, hey, we're going to be, I was like, okay, yes, I'm there. But then right after that, Scott Shanahan messaged me and said, hey, we're having a campaign in Italy. And it's the week before, yes. And I was like, yes, I'll go to that too. So I'm going there, and then when I land, I got like 2 days, and then we'll go to yes. And Scott's trip starts the Saturday after camp, which I didn't know that I was going to be able to go to camp because my job usually has they usually have a leadership retreat that I've skipped every year because I was at camp. And last year, after I skipped it, my boss was like, hey, you're going to it next year. And I was like, okay. Well, so I messaged the HR person who normally who puts this on, and I told her, I was like, hey, I usually have church camp during this week. What week is the leadership retreat? And she said, we're not having it this year. So, so yes for that. So good things have been happening. So for about a 4-week period, I will be going and doing all kinds of church things, which is exciting, and it's something that I'm glad that those opportunities have come up, and I'm really excited about it. Now, then I started thinking, why am I so excited about going thousands of miles away to teach the gospel, and how often do I think about going to my neighbor or to the people down the street or to my coworkers or to other people who I know here to teach the gospel? And then that kind of made me a little more sad. But now that when I thought about it, I was like, okay, let's do something about that. But some of the reasons when we talk about why we don't really work hard to evangelize here as much as we do when we plan to go there. And, some of the things that we talked about in Vic's class on Sunday, people would say things like, oh, well, I don't know enough, or I don't know that I'm ready or prepared to teach or to evangelize to other people, or people here aren't that interested. In other places, people are more interested in the gospel, but they're not really interested in it here. And I mean, those are excuses that we make, and those are things that we say. We can't really make that decision for other people to say that they're not interested, so I'm not going to tell them, because that's not how that works. God told us to do something, and we're supposed to do it. It doesn't matter whether they're interested in it or not. And I had conversations with people. We were talking about, Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, which neither of them have the truth. But one thing that they are willing to do, is go out and teach because that's what they're told that they're supposed to do. And, they'll give up their Saturday mornings every week for, I used to have a Jehovah's Witness that came to my house every week for probably like 4 months, because I opened the door and I let him, I let him in. But, he came, and so the first time he came, he was like, are you, would you like the Watchtower magazine? And do you know that sin and this and that and the other? And I was like, hey, let's come in, let's have a talk about it. And what I would do is, when we would study, I would ask him questions. Hey, the Bible says this is, Jesus is God, because that's one thing that Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe. They don't believe Jesus is God. So I can't have a conversation with somebody about anything else if they don't believe that. So that was what our conversation was about. And we had that conversation for, like I said, about 3 or 4 months. And then I think every time I would show him something, he would go back to, because he would be like, oh, I've never seen that. He would go back, he would ask one of his higher-ups or something, and then he'd come back and pretend like I didn't even talk about that other stuff, because he never had an answer for me, but then I would bring something else up, and he would go back. And then one day, he was supposed to be coming by, and 2 different people came to the house, and I said, oh, where's Mario? And they said, Mario moved to Florida. I was like, he didn't say anything about moving to Florida last week when he was here. But okay, I don't know if they sent him to a re-education camp or something. I don't know what happened, but he never came back after that. And the new people didn't come back after that week either. So, but what I was thinking that, we sometimes will say, it's not that we don't have enough. Vic mentioned that in his class on Sunday. That's not really an excuse. Sometimes we'll say that we don't want to be embarrassed talking to other people. And, Paul had something to say about that. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. We shouldn't be either. So then I started thinking, well, maybe it's that we don't have as much love for other people as we should, because we don't really care what's going to happen to them. Or, even worse, we don't believe that God is actually serious about what he says is going to happen to people who are lost. So, and if it's one of those 2 things, that's really bad. I hope it's not. We all hope it's not that. So, instead of wondering, do I not love other people or do I not believe God, I decided instead, maybe I should just figure out a way to go out and make sure that I'm teaching or preaching to other people, sharing the gospel, so that I don't have to think that I don't love people or that I don't believe God. I definitely believe God, so hopefully, I don't know. But I think I challenge all of us, one, if you are planning to come to Panama, let's get fired up, but let's get some practice in. Let's go out and talk to our neighbors. Let's go out and talk to people about the gospel. Invite people to Friends Day. That's a good start. And then do some things. Let's get ourselves out of our comfort zone and go out and do what God commanded us to do, which is to teach others about his gospel and about the fact that we have this salvation. Whenever I talk to somebody who's getting ready to run a marathon, that's all they talk about for months beforehand, because they're excited about it. Well, if we have a way to get to heaven, that should be what we talk about because we're excited about it. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Why did my Savior come to earth and to the humble grow? Why did he choose the lowly birth? Because he loved me so. He loved me so. He loved me so. He gave his precious life for me, because he loved me so. Until Jesus comes, I'll sing his praise, and then to glory go, and reign with him through endless days, because he loved me so. He loved me so, He loved me so, He gave his precious life for me, because he loved me so.
Would you pray with me, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today so very thankful you've allowed us this time, dear Lord. We know that we all have families and jobs and school and responsibility and things pulling us everywhere throughout the week. We thank you for allowing us this time to come and gather with brothers and sisters, learn more about you, worship you, and enjoy good fellowship. We ask that as we go throughout the rest of this week, help us to remain vigilant, remain away, and fight off temptation wherever we see it, and also take the message that we've been given today and apply it to our daily lives. If any opportunity should arise where we can help spread your word and grow your body, we ask that you please let us take that opportunity, give us the courage and strength and ready recollection of the things we've learned here. In your Son's name we pray.